Have you ever wondered why it seems so difficult to trust yourself? In a world that constantly bombards us with opinions, criticism, and expectations, finding our own voice can feel like an impossible task. Most of us at some point have felt incapable of making a decision without first consulting someone else's opinion. But what if I told you that all this search for external validation is pulling you away from what really matters? True power, true confidence comes from within, not from outside. Buddhist philosophy shows us that self-reliance isn't about always being right, but about learning to listen to and trust our own inner wisdom. It sounds contradictory, doesn't it? After all, we've been taught to seek advice, to listen to experts, to follow the rules of the game. But what happens when this quest leaves us paralyzed, unable to decide? If you've ever felt this way, know that you are not alone. There is a simple yet transformative solution. Trust your roots, your inner strength, and learn to grow from your own experience. And here's the secret that few reveal. Inner confidence doesn't come from certainty, but from acceptance. Are you ready to discover how to apply this to your life? Let's walk together on this journey, exploring how Buddhist practices can help you develop that true, lasting confidence. The question is, are you prepared to start listening to your own voice? Self-confidence, indeed, is the starting point for any meaningful journey. Amid so many external voices, how can we know which path to follow? The truth is, the world is full of expectations, criticism, and opinions. Everyone, at some point, has felt that others' approval is essential to move forward. But deep down, true strength lies in trusting yourself, in your own ability to discern. This is what mindfulness practices and Buddhist philosophy teach. The power comes from within, from your inner strength, not from outside. Imagine a tree growing in a field. It doesn't look to other trees for approval on which direction to grow. It nourishes itself from its roots, trusting that the path it follows is the right one. Similarly, in a world so noisy, it's important to learn to trust your own decisions, your inner wisdom, no matter how difficult it may seem. This is the core of Buddhist philosophy. Self-improvement and personal growth come from within, through self-awareness and inner confidence. And how do you begin to develop this self-confidence? It's a process that requires patience and self-discipline, something Buddhist practice refers to as the middle way. Small daily actions, like reflecting on your decisions and learning to listen to yourself more, are the beginning of this path. When you take small steps, doubt begins to dissolve, and self-reliance strengthens. And here comes a crucial question. How have you been strengthening your roots? Kale is the perfect example of someone seeking external validation. He's a brilliant young man with a promising future, yet he's constantly trapped in his own insecurities. In his attempt to please others, he ends up distancing himself from who he truly is. Every opposing opinion shakes him. Every criticism makes him doubt his abilities. And, like so many of us, he believes that acceptance from others is the only way to find security. His lack of self-reliance paralyzes him, and without realizing it, he becomes increasingly lost in the expectations of others. The truth is, this vicious cycle of seeking external validation never brings peace. Kyle tries to please his parents, his friends, even people he barely knows. Every new attempt to gain approval seems to push him further away from his own inner voice. He realizes that the more he seeks others' approval, the more his confidence in himself fades. This feeling of constantly being adrift is something many of us face, whether in work, relationships, or even in the small decisions of everyday life. This is a crucial lesson that Buddhist philosophy teaches. True peace cannot be found outside of ourselves. Finally, after much suffering and confusion, Kale decides to seek guidance. He hears about a wise monk, Monk Jin, and decides he needs answers. Kale believes that Jin can show him how to find the balance between pleasing others and trusting himself. Little does he know that the real answer doesn't lie in someone else's words, but in the rediscovery of his own inner wisdom. Kale then embarks on a journey in search of something that has always been within him. Upon arriving at the temple in the mountains, Kale is met with a peace he hasn't felt in a long time. The gentle sound of running water and the wind passing through the leaves create an atmosphere that seems immune to the chaos of the outside world. In this setting, Monk Jin greets him with a calm gaze, a posture reflecting years of mindfulness practice and self-mastery. Without many words, Jin listens attentively to Kale's concerns, sensing the tension and doubt that consume him. Every movement the monk makes, simple and fluid, seems to suggest an internal confidence that Kale longs for but doesn't know how to attain. Kale explains to the monk that his life has been a constant effort to please others, never feeling in control. He describes the weight he carries from external expectations, as though he's never good enough, even when he tries to follow all the rules and advice given to him. Jin, ever observant, realizes that the root of Kale's problem is his lack of self-reliance and emotional independence. The young man has yet to learn to trust his own decisions, always seeking validation from others that never truly comes. With patience, Monk Jin offers Kale something beyond superficial advice. He guides him to a place of inner reflection, suggesting that before looking for answers outside, Kale should learn to quiet the noise in his mind. Wisdom, Kale, doesn't come from the words you hear, but from the calm you find within yourself, says the monk. In that moment, Kale begins to understand that his spiritual journey won't be about finding a simple answer, but about developing self-awareness and learning to listen to his own inner voice. Sitting in front of Monk Jin, Kale finally opens up. He talks about his constant fear of making mistakes, his need to please others, and how it prevents him from making decisions. Every time I think I've found the right path, someone tells me I'm wrong, and I get lost again, Kale confesses, his voice heavy with frustration. He's exhausted, feeling like he'll never be able to make the right choice on his own. The weight of doubt paralyzes him, and he begins to question whether it's even possible to trust himself when the world is always full of conflicting opinions. Monk Jin listens attentively, without interruption. He realizes that Kale's fear of failure is his biggest obstacle. Often, the fear of displeasing others makes us forget who we really are. It traps us in a cycle of doubt that erodes our self-reliance. Jin understands that Kale needs to overcome this fear, but he also knows this is not an easy task. Kale isn't just seeking advice, he's looking for a guarantee that if he trusts himself, everything will turn out fine. And this is where Buddhist teaching comes in. Self-confidence isn't about always being right, but about accepting that the path is uncertain and trusting yourself anyway. How can I trust myself? Kale asks, his eyes filled with uncertainty. What if I'm always wrong? Jin calmly replies, mistakes are not the end, Kale. They are simply teachers. The issue isn't about avoiding failure, but learning from it. Self-trust grows when you accept that making mistakes is part of the journey and that each mistake is an opportunity for growth. Kale begins to understand that trusting himself doesn't mean being free from failure, but developing the inner strength to face it. With a gentle smile, Monk Jin decides not to offer ready-made answers. Instead, he proposes a reflection. Kale, if you were walking through a garden and found a flower growing in an unusual place, would it be wrong for being there? Or would it simply be being what it is? Kale hesitates, trying to process the question. Jin continues with the same calm. You see, the flower doesn't question whether it should grow here or there. It simply grows. And you? When was the last time you stopped to listen to your own voice without being influenced by the voices around you? This deep question starts to affect Kale in an unexpected way. He realizes that for a long time he had allowed the external noise to drown out his own inner wisdom. The metaphor of the flower isn't just about being in the right place, but about trusting the natural process of growth, something Buddhist teachings emphasize constantly. Jin is suggesting that, like the flower, Kale needs to let go of expectations and learn to trust himself, to allow his inner wisdom to guide him. It's a subtle yet powerful shift. Trusting doesn't mean having all the answers, but being at peace with the decisions you make. Kale begins to ask himself, how many times has he held back out of fear of being wrong? He had never thought of self-trust as being like the growth of a flower, natural, effortless, when we allow it. Through his questioning, Monk Jin guides Kale to a new realization. Life isn't about eliminating doubt, but learning to grow despite it. Self-reliance, as the monk suggests, comes from listening to the inner voice and trusting that, even in moments of uncertainty, that is the right path. Monk Jin slowly rises and invites Kale to follow him to the temple garden. Walking in silence, they arrive at a tall tree, its deep roots extending beneath the earth. Look at this tree, Kale, the monk says, pointing to the sturdy trunk and the branches reaching toward the sky. It doesn't ask the wind how it should grow, nor does it seek the rain's approval. It simply trusts its roots. Jin looks directly into Kale's eyes, letting the metaphor sink in for a moment. Kale gazes at the tree, trying to absorb the meaning behind the monk's words. Gradually, he realizes that the tree represents the essence of self-reliance. The roots are his experiences, his intuition, his inner strength. Just as the tree doesn't rely on its surroundings to grow, Kale too should not depend on external opinions and validation to make his decisions. The message of Buddhist philosophy is clear. It's essential to trust what's inside you, because that is where true strength resides. The external is only temporary, but internal roots sustain us throughout life. Jin then pauses and adds, "When you learn to trust your roots like this tree, no storm can topple you. That's how you build emotional independence and self-confidence." The young man starts to understand that to achieve balance and inner peace, he needs to cultivate this trust in himself, allowing his roots to support him, even in the face of challenges. It's not about controlling what happens around him, but trusting that, no matter the circumstances, he has the wisdom and strength to grow. Kale's learning was beginning to take root. Inspired by the words and teachings of Monk Jin, Kale begins to see his journey in a new light. He realizes that he had been searching outside of himself for something that had always existed within, the ability to trust his own choices. Buddhist wisdom teaches that true inner confidence doesn't come from being certain that we are always right, but from accepting that we can learn from our mistakes and grow from them. Self-reliance is more than just making the right decisions. It's about embracing the process of personal growth with all its imperfections. Kale now understands that the path to self-confidence is a continuous journey. It's not about reaching a final state of perfection, but about cultivating self-trust every day in every small decision. He remembers Monk Jin's words about the roots. Like the tree, he can trust what lies within him, no matter the storms he may face. This confidence is fueled by self-awareness, the constant practice of looking inward, of listening to oneself amid the chaos of the external world. The practice of meditation and mindfulness will be key to strengthening this confidence daily. Before leaving the temple, Kale reflects on his journey. He had arrived seeking answers from a wise teacher, but leaves with something much more valuable, the understanding that the answers had always been within him. All he needed was silence and presence to hear them. Monk Jin, with his teachings on self-discipline and mindful living, showed him that self-confidence is a habit to be cultivated, not something that appears overnight. Kale now begins to walk his path with a renewed inner strength, knowing that while the world around him may be uncertain, he can trust in his roots. As we close this video, I invite you to dive deeper into your own journey of self-awareness and growth. Watch our next video, Death versus Ego, Unveiling the Illusion You've Been Trapped In, where we explore how letting go of the ego can lead to true freedom. Click now and continue your path of discovery.